Hello, and welcome to Sharing Libraries, an LMxAC podcast. I'm Jonathan Upton, Library Catalog and Digital Content Support Specialist at LMxAC. This episode is part of a series featuring guests and topics from across LMxAC. That's the Libraries of Middlesex Automation Consortium, for those in the know. Historically, people think of libraries as buildings that contain books and librarians who look after them. These days, of course, that idea has broadened out considerably, with many libraries looking to meet their patrons wherever they are, whether that's in person or online. Today's episode is all about library adventures, and my guests are Leah Wagner, Director of the Monroe Township Library, and Chris Barnes, Coordinator of Communication, Marketing, and Outreach for the East Brunswick Public Library. Thank you both for joining me today.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you for having us.
So, first question, basically, just want to set the stage, as it were. What sort of campaigns or projects have you been working on in your libraries that you think have really met with success or reached out and found people during this pandemic?
So we have a bookmobile at the Monroe Library, but that kind of got sidelined during the pandemic. But we do have another service where we use a van. It was our at home services van, which goes out to people who are homebound. And we call it at home services because we didn't particularly care for the word homebound. And that was one service that we were able to keep going because it just was for the people who cannot get into the library. And we would just leave items on their porch for them. And it kept them connected with other people. Then we took that list, and they were the core group of people we reached out to during the pandemic to just like do a well check and talk to them and make sure everything, was good. Did they have a neighbor who needed anything? And it just kind of spread out. And like everyone else, I think we did a lot of online programming, but I would think that that was the most unique and the one that brought us the most publicity and made us all feel really, really good.
Excellent. Anything spring to mind for you, Chris?
Yeah, I would say that we got over our fear of sending email newsletters. And as everyone knows, when you check your email, you are bombarded with everything. One of our biggest concerns here was when we reach out to our customers through our email newsletter was trying to find that sweet spot. How much is enough content for an email? How often do our customers want to hear from us? And during the pandemic, because we had so many online programs and service updates and changes, we said, the heck with it. We will just keep sending stuff and hope for the best. One of my concerns was, is that what would our subscriber rate would be? Would people unsubscribe to us? Would they just delete our emails? That's not the case. Our online readership for newsletters has expanded and it's sustainable. And then librarians, myself included, started coming up with videos to share on our social media channels and platforms. So whether it was book reviews, how to do crafts, just fun stuff like that when people still really didn't know what to do in 2020 and early 2021. As people are more out and about, we've kind of phased a lot of that out. But it was an interesting switch from being the repository of content to share with people as to now switching and making the content ourselves.
So, Chris, one of the things we discovered is we had all these people who couldn't use the computer as fluently as they could and as we thought. And they learned to adapt and to start attending programs online. And so there was a lot of instruction that had to happen. But it's real interesting to me that we still have people who still want that part because of our population. They just don't want to go out. So, just like you, we learned all of those things and found out that some of them still need to be incorporated into what we do every day.
Oh, definitely. I mean, I have a
Yeah.
toddler at home. So for me, sometimes if it was going to my home library, and even if they had a really good program, it's okay. Well, I have all these things to take care of. But if I can just dial it up on my phone while I'm at the gym, while I'm cooking dinner, while I'm doing laundry, it's very convenient. And I also noticed a lot of libraries now stop being, how do I put this diplomatically? They stopped being for who they could bring in. It expanded the whole world. You could be an author based out of Seattle. Whereas before, it would have never been economically feasible to bring that speaker in. Now you can actually make that possible. So so as much as we all like going and seeing things live, if you can get an amazing presenter now from the other side of the planet, that's now an option. And it's kind of funny because Zoom and the basic technology has been around for years, but all of us are like, oh, no one's going to want to watch a library program. And now that we've opened that door, it's like getting Pandora back in the box.
I absolutely think that the unintended consequences of technology can absolutely be, be a theme in so much of life, and especially in the library world. One of the reasons Zoom became as popular as it did, obviously, it was the right tool at the right time. I think that among all of its competitors, if you think about Skype or Microsoft Teams or all these different things, One of the things I think Zoom has a reputation for is just being as simple as possible to use. Somebody sends a link, you click the link, you maybe click a button to get on. And so that lowers that level of entry and makes it as simple as possible for people to participate and be able to engage, which is, it's amazing.
And I think what Zoom does very well is if you're an audience member, they're the one, I guess it's telecom or whatever we call this, web chat, web video connecting, that really focuses on what the experience is like if you just want to be an audience. I mean, you can Skype with your friends. I mean, we've been doing that since the mid 2000s. I mean, we can still do that today. But what the killer app part of Zoom is that you can now have a group of people watching and they don't have to be involved in what's being broadcast or shared. You can mute them. You can say you can just watch, have a great time, just tune in and enjoy. And it's kind of funny that this like Slacker involvement that nobody thought about that.
Speaking of Slacker involvement, and also just this concept of emails, I think that people feel overwhelmed by emails and meetings all the time. And yet, one of the services that LMxAC offers its library members is Patron Point, which is an email marketing service. And they can use it to send newsletters, to send sort of automatic campaigns. So, welcome to the library sort of things that libraries are slowly starting to adopt. Looking at the statistics on that, speaking of how many emails is too many, I've been amazed. Some libraries, again, use it relatively infrequently. They have a major blast. The read rate is 30% or 40% or something like that. And then you have other libraries that are using it almost on a daily basis. People are engaged. People are receiving their emails and reading through them. So I think it's an incredibly viable method of contact that I think people are more and more comfortable with these days. When you think about how you communicate the library, whether that's what the library does, what the library values are, what you believe in, what you're working toward, what techniques do you think you find yourself using?
I know this sounds bad, but my motto is keep things as light as possible, especially on social media, because it's very easy to get into the mindset of, oh, well, I'm a public library and I'm just going to inundate you with every program we have, every policy change, every schedule. And the truth of it is that most of our customers and patrons don't really care about this. I mean, if you're scrolling through Twitter or Instagram or Facebook, you have less than a millisecond to catch their interest. So if you can post an original picture of something funny or silly or interesting from your building, that's better with less description. Use a sense of humor. Don't be sterile. Talk about what's going on in the world around you. One of my greatest social media faux pas, maybe, I don't even know how to describe it, was remember a few years ago when Prince passed and they had the big celebration at the Super Bowl that year? So I superimposed on one of the cloud projectors that they had our logo, and I shared it on our social platform and said it was so great of them to consider putting the East Brunswick Public Library on the Super Bowl laser light show during the Prince tribute halftime show. And you get a lot of people liked it, a lot of funny comments, a lot of shares. I'm not going to say which media organization it was, called me to confirm that actually happened. And I said I would have loved for that to have happened, but that would have never happened. And it was just some fun memery and a little bit of Photoshop fun that I did to amuse myself and my coworkers. And I think being a public library is that we forget that we're this mix of entertaining people and informing them. And if you keep your tone light and entertaining, it gets more attention for the good reasons.
You're talking about how many emails to send out. So we usually sit down with the person who does all of our social media, probably weekly, and go over what we think should go out that week and kind of schedule some of it depending on the programs that we have. And that, we're going to have this go out on the farmers market today, and then we're going to do the book discussions that are coming up later. And we do have different groups of people that we send some of this information to, which also helps. And we're very fortunate to have someone on staff who is willing to do that. So
One thing I've noticed about communicating in general, in the previous lifetime, I taught classes to members of the public and also to staff members. And if you have what we call a one shot, you have 1 hour to tell somebody everything about a topic that you possibly can. And so you want to cram that hour as full of everything as possible. And in my experience, that doesn't doesn't necessarily lead to the best result. You want to let people have room to breathe. You want to let people sort of explore the aspects that are of interest to them. And the reason I bring this up with respect to communicating marketing, there's a library who had a social media account that I was not in charge of, And they had rigged it up so that every time an event got posted to the calendar, it would automatically tweet about it. And it would just be a link to the event calendar page, which, on the one hand, let people know this is everything that's going on in the library. And at the same time, I think it overwhelmed people. It's, as Chris says, package it together, right? If you have a topic, come up with a few things that are of interest. So whether that's a collection that we've put together that you might be interested in, this month's display is on books about children with autism, or we have a program coming up that's a local author, and so here are our local authors' books, that sort of stuff.
It kind of feeds back to what you were saying, that with the auto posting on Twitter, one of the things is like you said, if you're posting something on one social platform and then it's updating from your website or pulling it, updating, well, people can see that that wasn't a genuine response or that someone didn't craft that or write that. And I think that does more damage than it does help to inform people. We have to go to bed sometimes. But that said, you should make it always look that there's somebody who's actually taken the time to write this, because our customers are very aware that this is just pulling from another service.
And helps create some sense of authenticity. So we've talked about things that we're doing to go out into the community. I think I saw on social media, Chris, that you were out in public at an event recently. Was it signing people up for library cards, or?
Yeah, we're all over the places. Things are getting open again and we get invited to attend. And so most recently, I'm actually doing a back to school visit tonight. The last event that I attended was a town business resource fair. So you had local businesses who wanted information about town services. And so at our library table, we were highlighting with marketing materials all the stuff that a business would need from our library. And at the same time, reminding them that, oh, well, if you live in town, we're your public library. So we have everything for you, whether you want books or movies or makerspace. So it's important to talk to people and then just try to learn. Like, you're building a relationship, and I would rather talk to less people, but know about everyone who came by my booth over the course of a morning than just to hand out flyers and tchotchkes to everyone. Because then when you see them come into the library, you can say, hey, I'm Chris. It was nice seeing you at this Chamber of Commerce event. Or, oh, hey, we met at the farmer's market. Yeah, I'm glad to see you finally got your library card. I mean, it's not marketing and sales that what we do particularly, but you're building relationships with the community that supports you. And that's the greatest thing in the world, is that when you see somebody who might not have been interested and they were just going around, and now that they've come back to the library and they're like, oh, well, I remember you told me there's a recording studio. Cheap plug because I'm sitting in it right now. How do I go about booking time with it? And other outreaches that I've done, you see someone who has a heavy metal band shirt, and I'm like, oh, I love Long Island hardcore from the early 90s. And they get shocked. And so now I've made a library friend in the community. And I say, oh, check out this on Hoopla. There's all these great EPs that are out of print. And now you've made a connection with someone. It's finding what connects you to that person who stops by the library table.
As you say, it's a relationship and it's the start of a connection. Who knows where that's going to lead to? It's the law of unintended consequences. Yeah, it starts with that connection and then leads to being available when they come in to check out your makerspace or your recording studio or whatever.
I think it's also a familiar face, right? And, people walk into your building and it may be the first time they walk in there. What are they looking for? Something that they recognize. And if they see you, that makes all the difference in the world. When I used to go to school visits, that was the last thing I would say to the kids is, "Oh, you know what I look like, come and find me." And they would. And that was huge because they didn't know anybody else. There were all these other adults there that they just didn't know.
Right. And to your point is even if they don't talk to you for months, they know next time in the library, she can help me because she came to my class visit. That's like one of the things I've learned is when you're on an outreach, whether it's at the farmer's market or like a more closed event, give your business card to everybody. Because if anyone ever needs a question about the library or how do I do this, now they have someone who can help them and you can be their concierge and say, hey, I don't handle this, but I'm going to introduce you to my friend so and so, and they're the collections librarian. Or, oh, you'd like to talk to one of your health librarians. I'm going to go connect you. It takes a second. That's the other part of it, too, is that we're always at outreaches and someone is bound to give you a question that you can't answer. You're not sure how that works. Just take their name and email. And when you get back, just say, hey, Jeff, it was great meeting you at the bike safety event. Here's the information about our meeting room policy. Hope to see you around. It's so easy, and it's just being nice. And that's the best part of the job.
So hearing you talk about that, of course, my first thought is, have either of your libraries, to your knowledge, ever hosted networking events, right? Because that's what we're talking about, networking, getting people to know who you are and letting them know that you're a potential resource. That sounds like it would be a cool fit. Again, not specifically related to outreach, but you're bringing people in and letting them connect and then realizing the library is a place where they can do that.
Yeah, we've done that several times. It's a lot of fun. You just have to remind yourself that even though you're throwing the party, not everyone is coming there to see you. And so you have to keep that in mindset. But again, like as you said, that you've now shown, okay, well, the library did this and they're active. So there's so many takeaways. And yeah, it's important. It's being a gracious host and making a good impression.
One of the other episodes in this podcast series is going to be focusing on communities themselves and also how libraries can reach out to historically underrepresented, underserved communities, people that they haven't seen come into the library as often. Speaking of outreach things we can do, part of that equation is reaching out and finding the people who have not been as active with the library before. Maybe they didn't know about it. Maybe it was difficult for them to be able to get there. So using Bookmobile would be one way to reach patrons. Having obviously satellite locations, even not necessarily a branch, but saying we'll be at the farmers market on a Saturday, whatever the case may be, of finding ways to reach out and bring in more people that would not necessarily have known about the library otherwise.
So I mentioned the farmers market,
Mhm.
and we were asked by our administration to host it. And so we ran this farmers market for 15 weeks there at the library. And we had 20 vendors, and we had people come who we had never seen before. Every week we would hear people say, "We've never been here before." And it was our opportunity to do just what Krista says, talk about all the different services. And I can't tell you the number of times we've helped people figure out how to load a book on their Kindle, how to do Hoopla, those kinds of things right there at the farmer's market, because we always had a table and we were always there to help them. And it was one way. We didn't go outside literally of the space that we had. We were in our parking lot, but it did bring in so many. The bookmobile does the same thing. We move that schedule around all the time, and it's really based on how many people use it and when they can use it. And we have one community that they're not really that far, but they're far enough that to get here in the evening is a little difficult with traffic. And we go there every week. Most places we go every 3 weeks. We go there every week. And they are people that would not normally come to the building. And we get the word out about all of our programs and things like that. So, yes, getting out is like the best thing you can do because that's when you find out who it is that you're not meeting. And just listening to people as they come into the building or you're at a meeting somewhere, you hear them, PTA meetings, even. You hear where those pockets are that you need to get. And some of them are a challenge. I have one that's a challenge, and it's been a challenge for all the years I've been here. And we still can't quite crack that nut. But
I was gonna say, but it just goes to show with that persistence on it. Someday, they're gonna need the library, and so it's just good to remind them and say, "Hey, I know you're not interested today, but we're still here." And that's what's important.
So, one of my responsibilities working for the consortium as a whole is to help the effort to publicize what's going on in libraries. We run an events calendar across the consortium. Patrons and staff can find it at explorelmxac.org. We're actually going to migrate from one calendar platform to another, but by the time you're listening to this episode, the new calendar should already have launched. So, enjoy. But events could be in person or online, and basically we want to get the word out about what all these different libraries are doing. They're doing amazing things. So the one last question that I have is, do you have a favorite outreach moment or story? Is there a particular moment where you connected with somebody or gave them just the right answer at just the right time, or something else that really struck a chord and it has stayed with you?
Yes. Mine's probably not as impactful but it's again, it's that you never know who you're gonna wind up talking to when you're out and about in the world. I was at a library outreach events one time, and as our producer Melissa notices, I love heavy metal. And there I was having a lovely conversation with this dude about metal bands. And he kept saying, "I can't believe I'm talking to a librarian about death metal bands." And I said, "Well, I'm not a librarian. I'm a library adjacent professional." But anyway, we kept talking and I got him to sign up for his library card. And I saw him in the building. He's like, "Dude, check out all these shows I'm going to in the next month. And by the way, these are my kids. Now they got their library cards." And just because at this one town event, they came up because he wanted to have his kids spin the wheel and keep them entertained for 5 minutes, and we have a mutual love of loud music with thrashy guitars, I was able to convert his family into card carrying library users. So that's it. I guess that's my
Success.
biggest takeaway for it. If you are a diehard New York Yankees fan and you're on an outreach and there's somebody who you see has a Yankees hat or shirt on, you clearly have an icebreaker for at least a 2 minute conversation with them. So do that. Be a person. Just connect with someone. Just make a conversation. You're the library. just because you're there, people are going to like you and want to talk to you for whatever reason, or they might just humor you. But either way, the fact that you've connected to them and defied this generational stereotype that all library workers are quiet and mousy and just care about books and finding information. Just be a person, make friends. That's how people are going to want to come back to the library.
That's 100%, Chris. That's
Oh, thank you.
100%. I was trying to figure out what to say because I knew you were going to ask that question, right? And so I'm going to go back many, 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 many years. I started a program here in 1990, and we called it the RAVE program. And I sent volunteers out to the schools. And it's because I had so many retired teachers in town, and they all wanted to come and do story time for me. And I explained that that wasn't how it was going to work, but I would find a way for them to do that. So we gave them each a teacher in a classroom, and they were with that teacher for the whole school year. The number of relationships that were built over that were phenomenal to me. And then I heard this story. I was talking to one of the readers who came into the library. And, this is the story of you never know when you touch somebody's life. And he had gone to the local Stop and Shop and he was checking out. And this young man who was in high school was checking him out. And he said, "You're Mr. Goodis. You were my rave reader when I was in third grade." And I always look at that and I go, see, we never know because we don't know until it could be years before we know what we've done. And so that's my favorite story because I think that sort of wraps up what I've been doing all my life as a librarian and working with people because you never know who you touch. And that's what outreach is all about.
Yeah, it ripples out endlessly. It's lovely.
Yeah, it's what it's about.
For anyone interested, a future episode of this podcast will cover library and librarian representations in media. So if you have a particular favorite, whether it's Marion the Librarian or Parker Posey's character in Party Girl or the library scene in All the President's Men, and just exploring and exploding, hopefully, that librarian mousy stereotype for once and for all, we'll give it our best shot. That's coming up in a future episode. This has been an amazing amount of fun for me, so hopefully it is for both of our guests and for our listeners. With me today were Leah Wagner, Director of the Monroe Township Library, and Chris Barnes, Coordinator of Communication, Marketing, and Outreach for the East Brunswick Public Library. I'm Jonathan Upton, Library Catalog and Digital Content Support Specialist at LMxAC. For more information about the libraries and activities mentioned today, as well as all of the members in our consortium, visit lmxac.org. Additional podcast episodes can be found at evpl.org/podcast. Thank you very much, everyone, for attending, and have a wonderful day.